They're members of the law profession in Mexico. They're members of the law profession in the United Kingdom. They're members of the law profession in other jurisdictions. This is a special session organized by the Mexican Bar Association. Today's topic will be the Law Society of England and Wales and the law practice in times of COVID-19. And for that purpose, we have the honor of the virtual presence of Simon Davies, President of the Law Society of England and Wales. Simon, thank you very much for the honor of your presence.
Thank you very much, Hector. The honor is very much mine.
Thank you. Simon is remotely connected to the sessions from the city of London, and we are recording this session in Mexico City. Simon Davies became president of the Law Society of England and Wales in July 2019. Simon studied law at Oxford and qualified as solicitor in 1984. He was a commercial litigation partner at the London office of the global law firm Clifford Chance from 1994, having joined the firm in 1982. Simon was the firm's recruitment partner between 1995 and 2000 and spent 2 years as president of the London Solicitors Litigation Association. Simon has been a member of the Court of Appeal Mediation Panel since 2008. He is a trustee of the Pro Bono Charity Law Works and a champion of the Mental Health for Solicitors Charity Law Clerk. Thank you very much again, Simon, for the honor of your presence. It's been a while since we don't see each other, and I'm so glad to see you again. The Law Society of England and Wales, what is it, Simon?
Well, just before I begin, may I say what a pleasure it is to be with you. What a shame it is that I'm not with you physically. I've already been to Mexico twice, and some of the most special memories in my career as Law Society President have been spent with my Mexican colleagues. Of course, not just in Mexico, but in the visits which you make to our jurisdiction. So I'm very pleased to be joining Barra Mexicana. I'm sorry that we will not be with you physically in September this year, Hector, for English Law Week, where obviously we spend time with you and your colleagues at ANADE in INCAM. Okay, we won't be with you physically, but we'll be with you in our hearts and in our heads.
Thank you.
So the Law Society. The Law Society of England and Wales. Scotland, by the way, and Northern Ireland have separate jurisdictions. The Law Society of England and Wales, we represent about 200,000 solicitors in England and Wales, and of course overseas, because many of them practice outside our shores. A significant number of them work alongside our Mexican colleagues in Mexico. And our job for those solicitors is to look after them as they do their day job, which is to look after the public, whether those be citizens and corporates. When I say look after, our principal job is to represent the solicitors, while of course acting in the public interest and upholding the rule of law. Separately, in relation to regulation, there is an organization called the Solicitors Regulation Authority that sits within the Law Society group, but is ring-fenced. It's even in a different town. It's in Birmingham. We're in London. And its job is to regulate who becomes a solicitor, to set the codes which solicitors must comply with, and is responsible for sanctioning solicitors if they fall short of those standards of conduct, which could either be by a fine or a reprimand, or ultimately, the worst sanction of all, stop being a solicitor.
Thank you very much, Simon. I understand in the UK you have solicitors and you also have barristers. Would you explain to us what is the difference between solicitors and barristers?
Certainly. The origins of the legal system in England and Wales are very much based in an oral tradition. In other words, although of course in courts many of the submissions are made in writing, a great deal of time is spent with the advocate presenting to the judge. We have juries in criminal trials, and even our civil trials can last for quite a long time. One last year, Hector, lasted 1 whole year. So you imagine the amount of time which it spends if you want to be an advocate in our jurisdiction. As a result, we have a specialist group of advocates who are called barristers. There's about 16,000 of them in England and Wales, so much smaller, and they specialize very much in advocacy. The solicitor's job, some of us are advocates as well, but most of us divide our time into either what we call transactional, non-contentious work, as you know, which in our jurisdiction can span from a small firm acting for people with mental health right the way through to a global giant. So that's what I call putting things together part of our profession. Litigators like me, those who work on the contentious side, are those who work with clients when things fall apart, as you'll be familiar. And there, most of my time is spent trying to keep my clients away from the uncertain outcome of a court. I like to keep my clients away from judges, so I don't go into court very often.
Thank you, Simon. What are the main activities of the Law Society?
The activities, if we go through the particular categories I was talking about, first of all, representing and supporting solicitors. Our job is to help them keep out of trouble. So that means making sure that they do not transgress the codes which they have to comply with the Solicitors Regulation Authority. We want to make sure that they are given all the support they need to supply a top-class service to their clients. So at any particular point in time, you will see guidance being issued by one or more of the specialist committees which we have at the Law Society, which cover technology, wills, economic crime, property. These are all consisting of specialist solicitors who give their time for nothing, and they'll be issuing guidance to the profession to help them keep out of trouble and to add value to their clients. Separately, we spend a considerable amount of time with government. I don't think I would really use the word lobbying. It's more, I think, educating government often into the unforeseen consequences of legislation they're thinking of passing, but where we are lobbying them in relation to the public and solicitors is in the context of legal aid. That in our system is the aid, the financial aid, which is given by government to those people who cannot afford to have lawyers. That's called legal aid. And there we have been campaigning for a long time on the basis that the amounts which are paid are too low, that the kind of cases you can get for legal aid are too few, and that the amount of money which you have to have in order to qualify for legal aid. The last piece I would mention is the work internationally. In upholding the rule of law, we aren't just focused on the United Kingdom. You will see us campaigning for the upholding of human rights around the world, particularly where lawyers are threatened with jail or are tortured just for doing their jobs. And you will see us out there protecting them. And otherwise, internationally, it is a great pleasure for us and an important role for us to spend time as part of the international legal community, trying to make sure that global solutions, global legal solutions are made available to citizens and corporates who do operate globally.
Thank you, Simon. What are the challenges of the legal profession in the United Kingdom in light of the Brexit, now the Brexit plus COVID-19?
Well, that's an interesting combination. Perhaps if I reverse that order and deal first of all with the impact of COVID-19. The impact of COVID-19 is very much the same around the world. What COVID-19 has done is stop human activity. Lawyers are only busy when there is human activity. In our jurisdiction, I think you will see two different types of activity stopping, and therefore two different types of impact. The first is where there is an immediate impact, where law firms pretty much stop doing any kind of work. Immigration. No one's coming into the country. No one wants to come into the country. Real estate sales and purchases just stopped because no one could start going around houses or move into houses. Wills, by contrast, there is a considerable amount of work for obvious, very sad reasons. But that creates another problem, because in our jurisdiction, like so many others, wills have to be witnessed by human beings. So we've been trying to work to see if we can improve that situation. And crime, because the jury cases have all stopped. Trials have stopped. So therefore, those solicitors who are spending time dealing with trials, they have no work. So that's the immediate impact, and those kind of firms are suffering very seriously at the moment. That stage, the falling off of activity, I think is going to arrive later for the larger commercial firms. Larger commercial firms had quite a large amount of work in the pipeline, which they were able to conclude. And many of those transactions could be concluded remotely. The impact on them is likely to happen as transactions do not start, as clients find they do not have the financial ability and capital to invest, as global deals do not materialize. That stage has not yet happened, and that stage is difficult to predict. So in either of those cases, what we're seeking to do is provide support to those who are immediately in need, and then we'll be spending time with those who are likely to be in need in the future. Brexit. I think just to put that into context, whatever happens with Brexit, the United Kingdom, England, Wales, City of London will remain absolutely open jurisdictions to lawyers, to business, to anybody who wishes to come here to add value to our jurisdiction and wishes to themselves work here. Certainly in the legal world, we have large numbers of overseas firms in London. That will continue. Lawyers from around the world can continue to come to our jurisdiction to practice. As for outside the world, outside the United Kingdom, I see no reason why there should be artificial barriers placed in the way of clients in Germany and France and elsewhere in Europe from being able to choose the lawyers they want, choose the laws they want, and to have their choices of jurisdiction respected. But I'm not a politician, but what I am is optimistic that the legal profession in England and Wales and around the world are quite capable of standing together and rising above domestic political differences. So I'm very optimistic.
Thank you very much, Simon. Independence of the judiciary. What would it be the role of the Law Society of England and Wales in cases in which politicians or other powers might pretend and influence or affect the independence of the judiciary either in the UK or in other jurisdictions? In those hypothetical cases, what would be the role of the Law Society?
Well, if we start with a real-life example in relation to our own jurisdiction, we had a government who took a step of suspending Parliament, and the government said they were doing it for the right reasons. A challenge was made, and that challenge went to our Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that the government had acted unlawfully and that its attempt to suspend Parliament had no validity of any kind. So Parliament literally had to go back in the next day. And there was a great deal of press at the time, with some questioning whether the Supreme Court were biased, because the Parliament had been suspended in the context of the government's discussions about Brexit. So there were those, the major Brexit supporters, who said that the Supreme Court was clearly biased. They said the Supreme Court, clearly people who did not want to have Brexit take place, and they were stopping it. So first of all, I think it is very good to see the independence of our judiciary in our country stepping in and overruling this government without any consequences at all. No judges vanished, no one was tortured, there was no negativity for the judges involved. So it shows the rule of law is alive and well. The role of the Law Society was more in that context to come out publicly condemning those who were saying that the judges were biased, standing up for the judiciary, saying how important it was that the independence of the judiciary and its impartiality was respected, and explaining why it was that the judges were perfectly entitled to be applying the law in the way they did, and it did not follow that they were following their own personal preferences or biases. Around the world, we will certainly be intervening when we see lawyers who are being persecuted and lawyers who have sanctions taken against them when they are seeking to argue for their clients, and indeed sometimes when they have the government on the other side.
Thank you very much, Simon. We have seen in various jurisdictions attempts to change legislation in order to threaten or affect the attorney-client privilege. We have seen that process in Mexico, in the United States, and some other jurisdictions. What do you think about that problem, and what's the situation in the UK?
I think it's a real potential threat. The starting point, as we know, is that a client, whether they are an individual or a corporate, must know that whatever they say to their lawyer will be kept confidential. Because otherwise, they will not tell their lawyers the facts which the lawyers need to have in order to be able to advise them. So illegality will be driven underground, and the people who need legal advice will stop seeking that advice. So it's hugely important. However, it is not regarded as attractive by those who want to understand what people are telling their lawyers. So governments don't like it, the press don't like it. Some judges, I would say, don't like it, but are wary of it because it means that things are not told to the court, which they consider they might want to hear, but they're not hostile to it. Prosecutors tend not to like it for obvious reasons, and certain kinds of regulator. So what we need to always be very careful about is that when there is regarded as some kind of a threat, let's take a good example in modern life, terrorism, money laundering, where there's a concern there that terrorists and money launderers and criminals may be misusing lawyers for the purposes of their own gain, there's a natural temptation to say, well, we should be able to see those kind of communications. But that starts from a understandable beginning, but then quickly can undermine the whole concept of confidentiality and privilege. And the Law Society is consistently out there, orally and in writing, upholding confidentiality. We actually intervened, which means we took part in a law case where our Serious Fraud Office was proceeding against a particular company, and the Serious Fraud Office was putting forward an argument about the extent of the law of privilege, which we thought was too narrow, and we intervened in that case to support the proper reading of the law of privilege, and that was upheld. So we are active, Hector, in the press and in court.
The Mexican Bar Association every year is invited to the opening of the legal year in London, in which the Law Society of England and Wales is heavily involved, and we thank you for that. Would you tell us a little bit about that ceremony? We don't have that kind of opening of the legal year in Mexico, so how that started? Because I had the opportunity to attend to the spectacular ceremony at Westminster Abbey. You have various events, gala dinner, great academic programs, a lunch and meeting with Lord Chancellor at the British Parliament, and other activities. Would you please let us know a little bit more about the opening of the legal year in London?
Certainly. Well, it's a little bit like a legal university in a sense that the work of the courts, it divides quite literally into terms. You will have effectively the winter term, the spring term, and the summer term, and then breaks in between. October every year is regarded and is the beginning of our legal year. It's not a calendar year. It starts in October. Again, like many universities, their beginning of their year is also regularly in September or October, and we are very similar. And it's a fabulous ceremony. Westminster Abbey with all the top judges in the land are there, solicitors, barristers, and of course it's also a religious ceremony, because religion and the law certainly have to go hand in hand, and it's a very moving and traditional ceremony. And afterwards, of course, we have the opportunity spend time with the bar leaders from all over the world who travel to London for the ceremony, and we will have workshops and seminars and exchange ideas and experience for the benefit of all our respective countries. It remains to be seen, of course, however, Hector, whether by October life has returned enough to normal for there to be that kind of opening of the legal year. I don't want to predict these things, but it wouldn't surprise me that this October I will be sitting here in London interviewing you, saying, I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person this time, but this is our virtual opening of the legal year ceremony. I'm not saying that's for certainty, but it wouldn't surprise me, Hector. But otherwise, even if we do not have the opening of the legal year, let me just enforce and reinforce what I said at the beginning, which is that our friends and colleagues from Mexico are always guaranteed a warm welcome at Chancery Lane in London. We've had a very close relationship for a number of years with your young lawyers coming and spending time with law firms in London, exchange visits, and this is exactly what we need to do as jurisdictions generally around the world, to be working together and ensuring that that clients in Mexico and England and Wales get the best possible legal advice they can.
Thank you, Simon. About 2-3 years ago, we started an interesting program with the Law Society of England and Wales and Bar Council, and we created together the English Law Week in Mexico. Would you explain a little bit about it?
English Law Week is where we travel, we being the Law Society and the Bar Council, together, by the way, with a number of international law firms. As you know, some of them have offices in Mexico City, and we spend time with local practitioners in Mexico, trying to explore areas of common interest and common ground. So not just talking about this is how everything's done in England. We have mixed panels, so we'll be talking about this is how it's done in Mexico, this is how it's done in England, what can we learn from each other. It's not therefore so much a English Law Week in the sense of just talking about England, Wales and our laws. It's much more a mutual education session and a building of relationships, and I know myself the kind of relationships which have started in Mexico City, I hope will carry on, Hector, for many years to come.
Thank you, thank you. And I also understand there is a program in which through the Law Society and other institutions, some scholarships are granted to young Mexican lawyers who spend some time not only in universities in London, but also a kind of internship in firms. Would you tell us about it for the young lawyers, please?
Absolutely right. And we have these kind of scholarships available for young students from a number of countries in South America, but certainly including Mexico. And what happens is that they come to London and they spend a couple of weeks in a law firm and a couple of weeks in barristers' chambers, and they get to know what the system is like here, what it would be like to work in London, and they mix with the other students in the evenings. I don't want to make it sound, Hector, too much like a holiday, but it's a very enjoyable way to learn about what happens in England and Wales and how to improve your own skills as a person and a lawyer and make friends who will be your friends forever.
Thank you very much, Simon. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Simon. Would you please give a message to all members of the legal profession in Mexico, in the UK, and other jurisdictions, please?
My message to the legal professions in either jurisdiction, or indeed any jurisdiction in the world, is to always remember why we are lawyers. And the reason why we're lawyers is, frankly, to serve other people, and always to make sure that we're putting the interests of our clients ahead of ourselves, and remembering at all times not to be too tough on ourselves, my own experience is that often because we are such good servants that we do apply very tough criteria to ourselves. We worry about failure. We like to take problems from clients' shoulders onto our own, which sometimes causes us mental health problems. Of course, we have a wonderful career as a lawyer, but my message, I think, to the legal profession will be serve, but then have a sense of perspective. Do not take yourself too seriously.
Thank you very much. This was Simon Davies, President of the Law Society of England and Wales. It's been a great honor having you here, Simon. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much indeed, Hector.
Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.